In 1969, Wolf Wolfensberger wrote, "It's a well-established fact that a person's behavior tends to be profoundly affected by the role expectations placed upon him. Generally, people will play the roles they've been assigned." Today on Education Forum, Higher Education for All, People with Developmental Disabilities on Campus. From the studio in the College of Education and Health Professions at Columbus State University in Columbus, Georgia, this is Education Forum with your hosts, Dr. Jeffrey Conklin and Dr. Greg Blaylock. Welcome to Education Forum. I'm Greg Blaylock. Jeff Conklin is out on assignment this morning, but we've got a couple of guests from Atlanta's Center for Leadership in Disabilities to join us today to talk about an important aspect of diversity within our society. You know, the opening quote was written by Dr. Wolf Wolfensberger. He was a major advocate for people with developmental disabilities over 40 years ago. And he was a major proponent for the idea of normalization within the United States. Boiled down to its essence, normalization is the idea that people with developmental disabilities have the same opportunities as typically developing adults within our society. With that, people with developmental disabilities are better able to reach their potential and become legitimate, valid citizens within today's society. The normalization principle underlies what we're going to talk about today, and it's the idea that college is open to people with developmental disabilities. To help me discuss this topic, we're joined by Susanna Miller, a community support specialist for the Center of Leadership in Developmental Disabilities. Did I say that right exactly?
It's the Center for Leadership in Center for Leadership and Disability.
Out of Georgia State University, actually. Welcome, Susanna.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
It's good to see you again. Also with us is Stacy Ramirez, Director of Individual and Family Supports with the Center for Leadership and Disability. Welcome, Stacy.
Glad to be here.
Appreciate your time. You know, today we're going to talk about college for people with developmental disabilities, but I thought it might be informative to first define who we're talking about when we talk about people with developmental disabilities. So, are we just talking about people with intellectual disabilities? Who exactly are we discussing?
Yeah, that especially right now is a major topic of conversation around the definition of developmental disabilities. And as a mom of 3 boys, my middle son has autism, and I always want to share with folks that it's not just about an intellectual disability. That can be part of it,
sure,
but it's not all of it.
It also includes other aspects of development.
Yeah, there's conceptual skills, like for instance, our reading, our literacy skills, or are we good with numbers or not. It includes social skills, just the ability to sit here and understand the social cues of when to stop talking. And then also those practical skills of daily living.
Right, right.
So what we need to keep in mind is someone who uses a chair, who doesn't perhaps use formal language to communicate and needs help and support when they need to be fed, but may have a brilliant mind, has a label of a developmental disability.
Sure, okay. We're talking about maybe, to use some other terminology from the field, kids with autism.
Yeah.
Are kids that we might refer to as kids with a developmental disability.
Right.
Many kids with autism have an intellectual disability, but not necessarily all kids with autism have an intellectual disability. And so the idea of developmental disability is truly sort of an umbrella term that describes a multitude of diverse individuals, really.
It's
right?
very much a spectrum.
That's right.
Both in intellectual ability and the practical daily living skills.
Sure, sure. Even when you consider somebody like Stephen Hawking, might be considered somebody with a developmental disability. And as you say, absolutely brilliant mind, gifted individual. And so it really is, I like the term spectrum of abilities when we're talking about developmental disability here. Well, you know, college has not always been open to people with developmental disabilities. Why is that? What barriers exist on college campuses or in the higher education for people with developmental disabilities?
I think it's a multitude of things, but I think there are probably two answers that I go to. And number one, traditionally, college has been seen as more of an exclusive right, more of a upper echelon of education. And so there's a little bit of, you know, I deserve this, I earned the right to do this because of the grades I made, the clubs I was in. You know, it's more of an elitist kind of...
The piece of society that I occupy, perhaps, even a
right.
status.
And to take that to individuals with developmental disabilities, there have not been the expectations set forth that these individuals are smart enough or bright enough, have the social skills, have the conceptual skills that we talked about, and have the practical skills to be able to succeed in such an environment. And so, therefore, why would it make sense for them to go on to this elite establishment if they aren't valued as members of society in general?
Sure, sure. You know, when you think about college campuses, and you just go back not too long ago, 50 years ago, the thought of African Americans attending many of our public and private universities in the United States was a thought that many people thought was absolutely crazy.
Right.
And yet that's a regular part of college life today. People with physical disabilities attending college campuses 50 years ago was not necessarily something you saw often. And today, that's another piece of the student body. What is it about developmental disability that causes us to be talking about this, what I think of as a revolution in, another revolution in higher education, where we're seeing another group who are beginning to take hold and have access to college campuses? What is it about developmental disability exactly that has them lagging behind other marginalized groups?
Well, I think in our culture, in our country, we've traditionally looked at deficits and looked at what people couldn't do and just tag somebody if they could not formally communicate as incompetent and not able to really communicate in effective ways. And so our culture is shifting around how we view individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and we're focusing on their competencies and where they can succeed. Because we all have competencies and we all have deficits. And
Sure.
I don't want my future determined by my deficits. I want my future determined by, you know, what I do well and what my gifts are. And
Sure.
so I think now that people are seeing individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities in the light of capabilities and abilities, that we are able to see what kind of gifts and contributions that they can make to society in general, and especially in a college setting, which is, I see as the perfect little world to develop life skills and social skills. That's where I, discovered those things and was able to really grow up and become the adult I am today, was in my college setting.
Another key piece of the puzzle, and it's a banner that Susanna and I both raise high, is self-advocates. People with developmental disabilities are speaking out and standing up, literally or otherwise, but saying, I am a person first, I happen to have a label, but I deserve, by law actually, all of these rights that you have.
Sure.
So stop keeping me down, it's ready to go. And in families, again, I wear the family hat often, but families with that low expectation have been taught or have drunk the Kool-Aid on low expectations, and my son or daughter won't, are starting to listen to another voice. My son or daughter will, and there's no ceiling anymore. And so it's an exciting time.
It is, and I think it's interesting when you talk about expectations and what families many times traditionally and even still in many areas of the country are taught when their child is born with a developmental disability, and maybe it's somebody from the hospital, a doctor or a nurse, being very frank from their perspective with them and saying, well, your son has or your daughter has Down syndrome, for instance, or they are labeled at 2 with autism and are told that as a result they're really not going to amount to much. And I think that's a legacy that comes from what we have traditionally done in this country up until about 40 years ago,
Right.
warehousing people with developmental disabilities, taking them out of society, not expecting much from them.
Exactly.
And that's exactly the point that Wolfensberger really was trying to get at through his own work, is the point that people become what you expect of them.
Exactly
And
what
if
it
you
is.
expect very little from somebody, chances are they'll have very little opportunity to become anything, and as a result will fulfill that prophecy. You know, you hit upon something, Susanna, about college life and what it does for us as adults, and you talked about how much
We
you
both started
learned,
smiling.
how much you learned as a college student back in the day. College is really so much more than going to class, isn't it? In fact, just before the show, I was talking to Dr. Mike Baltimore, our director, about college life, and he was talking about how difficult it was when he was an undergraduate to attend 8 o'clock classes and how that affected his grade.
Right.
And what that does in terms of teaching consequences for your actions and that sort of thing. What are some things that college life offers people in general besides a classroom education?
It offers community. You know, you are kind of forced into community. You can choose to take it or not, but you're
Right.
living in a dorm. You're going to classes with people. You're passing the same people day to day. You're having to get up on your own and make the decision and the choice to get up and go to class. It's not, I have to get up at 6 o'clock every morning to go catch the school bus. It's, I have to get up at 8:30 to be ready for my 10 o'clock class that I want to go to.
Right.
And so there's that time management piece. There's often opportunities to work on campus, and so you get a piece of that, and you get a piece of being part of a community and having some freedom, but also having some oversight and some supervision, and having people who are there, whether it's your professors or student life or your RA, who have your best interest at heart. And so there are a lot of teachable moments. There's a lot of, oh, I need to get my laundry done because I have no clean clothes and mom's not here to do it. Okay, I need to either figure out how to do this or get somebody to help me and things like that.
That's right. That's right. You know, community. That's a big piece that I think about. You know, in high school, in fact, through high school, kids' peer community are the people that they're put with.
Right.
You know, they're the people there in their neighborhood. They're the people in their classes, and they really have little opportunity to truly choose the community and the people that they hang out with for the most part. College does really represent the first time for many kids where they have the option and really the obligation to seek out a community, to meet people from different parts of the country or different parts of the world and join different types of clubs and really interact with people outside of their immediate neighborhood.
Well, make those choices and those decisions, because oftentimes you're put these places, and college was a place where you're free to pick your classes, free to pick your student organizations, free to come and go as you please.
Sure, sure.
There's 3 more that I think are important to include in this, and one is the ability, the space in which to build your independence. And that grows on some of the things you were to be independent, but also to be part of the community, but also a place where you're going to make mistakes. There's no one there, and that's some of the best learning opportunities is when you are given the opportunity to make mistakes. And then the last piece that I think is important is it's a place where you can begin to mold into the person you're going to become. It gives a more freer space
Well, an
to
exposure to other options
Right.
that, oh, I don't have to fall in line with
Right.
where I've been raised and who I can be something more than what I've seen around me in my neighborhood or
Right.
in my small town or big town.
Right, right.
So that personal growth into becoming the person that you're meant to be here
Yes, yes.
in our community.
You know, Stacy, you remind me of a concept that we deal with in special education, K through 12 special education, related to kiddos with developmental disabilities, and that's the concept of the dignity of risk.
Right.
And there's the fact that
I
there's
preach on that.
exactly, there is dignity, inherent
Mm-hmm.
human dignity in taking risks. And I think you reminded me of that when when you were discussing the opportunities in college for kids to fail.
Make mistakes.
And how important that is for all of us. And college is a great place. As you were saying, Susanna, college is a place where you've got some freedom, but you have some people there who do have an inherent interest in the well-being of you as a student.
Right.
But you've got the opportunity to fail, to make mistakes in different ways, and to learn how to deal with those mistakes. Learn that it's not the end of the world. You know, we see this with kids that I used to teach who are gifted and talented. You know, very, very smart, creative kids. Many people think of them as kids that can do no wrong, and of course, if you know a kid who's gifted and talented, you know that that's not necessarily true.
Right.
But you know, many kids who are gifted and talented are very afraid of making mistakes. And part of what
Definitely.
we build into curriculum for kids who are gifted and talented is teaching them how to make mistakes.
Right.
Otherwise, they don't take risks. And that's an important part of becoming who you are. Boy, how true that is for people with developmental disabilities. Opportunity to make mistakes.
They're not given that opportunity very often because they're under such close supervision.
That's right.
Moms and dads want to keep them safe.
Sure.
I need to keep them safe. Teachers want to keep them safe. Oh, we can't go on that trip because there may be bullying. Well,
That's right.
there may be.
There may be. And that's part of what we have to do as people is learn to deal with some of the real parts of life that are not so fun necessarily.
Yeah.
So then, as we think about this concept, you know, in the last decade, we've seen an explosion of both public and private universities, major universities, even flagship universities, opening the doors and creating avenues for people with developmental disabilities to attend college. What is it in the last decade that's contributed to this?
I think part of it, as Stacy mentioned earlier, strong self-advocates and parent advocates who they're speaking up and saying, I want this, and parents and teachers and professionals in and out of the college setting going, okay, we're going to make this happen because I know you and I know that this is something you want, this is something that will be helpful. We've also had the Higher Education Opportunities Act that has really pushed creating educational opportunities in higher education for students with disabilities and with developmental disabilities. And we also have a national movement going on, and it's an organized movement, and Think College and UMass Boston has really taken the lead on this. And so there's a clearinghouse of resources. There are women and men who are employed there who can be technical assistants. There are networks being formed, formally and informally. And so this issue is getting a lot of research done. There's a lot of resources, and there's just some manpower behind it. And it's gotten buy-in from families, from K through 12 educators, from college and university faculty and staff, as well as organizations that are on the periphery, kind of like we are.
Even state service systems.
Yes.
I mean, it's,
there's money coming from, people are believing in it, and money's coming from places like DBHDD in our state and in other states, whatever their
Department of Behavioral Health Services type organizations.
right.
and then you
They're
have
investing.
schools taking it on, and what's really happening is people are seeing it, and it's a see it to believe it, especially how we've, as a society, viewed individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and then seeing them succeed and be beautiful voices for themselves. People see this and they're like, oh, this is is who somebody with an
Right.
intellectual and developmental disability is. And, oh, this is what their voice sounds like. They sound competent. They sound educated. They are able to fit in and mold into society and be a everyday contributing member.
That's right. That's right. You know, you remind me as you were talking about the journey people with developmental disabilities have taken over the last 200 years in this country. And one of the things from the K through 12 perspective is, you know, 35, 40 years ago, we opened the doors to K-12 public education in a serious way to people with developmental disabilities. And, you know, I think we're at a point in the last decade where we're seeing the fruits of that. We are, for the first time in the history of this country, we're graduating people with developmental disabilities. They're leaving high school with some real excellent skills. And they're leaving high school and saying, now what?
Now what?
How can I continue my education?
Don't want to just do the remote control in front of the TV.
That's right. That's
Another
right.
piece of, I think, the puzzle in the education is the movement of inclusion. That
Sure.
there are true, amazing pockets of excellence in Georgia and certainly across the nation where people with any kind of label is now being included in their community, in their school community, and in their education. And that person especially is not going to go into a day hab program or some kind of group home. That person will want to succeed.
And it's, for their typical peers, it's normal to be included with
Right.
individuals. And so,
So society is embracing.
as it does with
Right.
every kind of
Right.
inclusion of someone who's different, and once it's a normal everyday occurrence, it's a no-brainer that this is where we should be going.
That's right. It's interesting when you talk to people our age about the idea of people with developmental disabilities being on a college campus. It might sound strange to a lot of people our age, but to high school kids,
Yeah.
they look at you and go, yeah.
So?
What's the interesting piece? You know,
I look forward to the day, I just made a note of when it would be missed, that the diversity of a college campus minus a person with a developmental disability is missing something people are looking around for.
Right. Well, you know, there's a lot to talk about with regard to helping make college a place that a person with a developmental disability can truly succeed in. And so I think this would be a good time to take a break. And then when we come back, I'd like to talk a little bit about person-centered planning and how that fits in with creating college success for people with developmental disabilities. Okay, I'm Greg Blaylock, and you're watching Education Forum. Welcome back to Education Forum. This morning we're discussing the concept of people with developmental disabilities attending university campuses. And before our break, we started talking a little bit about what it takes to make college a successful place for people with developmental disabilities. And related to that is the idea of person-centered planning. I'd like to spend the next several minutes just talking about what person-centered planning is, how it fits into college completion for people with developmental disabilities, and what we can do to support person-centered planning. So let's just start with, Stacy, I'm going to ask you, what is person-centered planning? What's that all about?
Well, because you opened with a Wolfensberg quote, it's a perfect intro into person-centered planning because that's the foundation, the normalization of all. That people with developmental disabilities, it's so often when I'm talking with families or others, they say, well, my normal child or my normal son or daughter, and I always stop them and I say, well, once I've met a normal person, I'm going to get really excited because I've just not met a normal person. But Wolf took this work to another level in being very person-centered. Then with his work, was built upon by, and I'm going to throw out the names of the greats, the foundations of what we've got going on. So we've got John O'Brien and Connie Lyle O'Brien, who live right here in Georgia, who are a father and mother of person-centered planning. Jack Pierpoint and Linda Kahn. and then bless her heart, that's left us now, but Marcia Frost, and all of them are in Toronto. They did foundational work on building on what Wolf Wolfensberg had started, and actually gave us tools to guide conversations. So when people ask me what is person-centered planning, it's just sitting with someone and having conversations about their hopes and dreams. What is it, I always use the words, what makes your toes tingle and your heart sing? And we're going to start there, and then we're going to build on using those gifts and capacities and building community, which we go back to. It fits in beautifully what Susanna was sharing about college life, yeah. So that it's about building community.
So to put it simply then, it's really about talking with somebody about what do you want life to be? What do you want to do in life? What kinds of things do you want to be involved with? Is that really the essence?
Based on what you're really, really good at. So yes. So let's drill down on your gifts. And then what do you want to do with those?
So
it's a mixture of hopes and dreams and pragmatism.
Right.
So what do you dream? What do you want? But what is realistic based upon your, not other people's, but your gifts and talents and how you perceive them. And so I really like it because you get to hope and dream and drill down to what this person wants, but you also get to see how it is laid out, and you get objectives, and you get, in 1 month I need to do this, and in 6 months I need to do this. And so there's a practical piece and a dreamier piece.
So when we're talking about doing person-centered planning, when do we do that with somebody? Is there a time that you do it, or are there prerequisites that have to be in place, or?
There's no time. One of my favorite stories of person-centered planning is with a 2-year-old. So the 2-year-old is medically fragile, and the families needed some support. And she had gone to a conference and heard about person-centered planning and said, why do I have to wait? And she didn't. And the gift that happened with that specific story was that the family thought they were bringing the community to support them, but in bringing that community together, they began to support each other. So it just grew into this. It's called Ivy's League out in Rome, Georgia.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the idea of, and I've noticed a couple times you've talked about building on a person's interests and strengths, right?
Capacities and gifts.
Yes.
Yeah. Now that's a little different from how we might historically, traditionally, in what I call special education, think about individualized planning for kids in K through 12 schools. We recognize their strengths, but really, for the most part, in a traditional sense, we focus on their
deficits.
Weaknesses. Yes, their deficits.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very much a medical model type approach, I think, to humanness.
And that's another gift that Wolf gave us, is to pull away from that medical model, not to stay on him too much. But when I do presentations on person-centered planning, I talk about that an IEP, an individual education program, is needed because you assess for deficits and you build goals and objectives to help someone build their abilities around those deficits. That's needed. When I go to the doctor, I don't want to go and hear all the good things. There's something hurting here. Tell me what's wrong and fix it. There are places for looking at deficits and fixing those. That's not person-centered planning. Person-centered planning has no conversations at all about what we're fixing. Person-centered planning focuses, drills down on what are you really, really good at, and how are we going to use that in building community and supporting your dream and getting there.
Okay, so then person-centered planning is something that might be used only with people that have things that they're good at. And there's obviously a segment of population perhaps that doesn't have anything they're good at because a disability might be so severe.
That's
or
good.
somebody might assume. How would you respond to that?
Thank you for that one. So it's my perception that everybody has a gift.
Mm-hmm.
Every person has a gift. And it may take more conversation to find what that gift is or less, but there is not a person that is here that doesn't have a gift. And person-centered planning, it's important to note, I talked about the 2-year-old in Rome, Georgia, but it's again the spectrum of life. It's a lifespan time where this 2-year-old may totally change what she wants in life, and when she wants to go to college,
Sure.
that we would revisit it. So it's just bringing together people to talk about a focused person.
When you say people, who
Good.
are we talking about?
Their community, who is important to them, who is looking out for their best interest, who sees gifts, and who sees
Right.
gifts in different areas. You have parents who are going
Okay.
to see a certain part of life, but you have teachers. You might have a sibling, aunts and uncles, friends from community activities, whether it's church or the Lions Club or wherever you're involved. So it's people who can see this person as a whole person and who can see the gifts.
Right.
So it's whatever community looks like
Mm-hmm.
to
For
that
an
person.
individual.
Yeah.
You know, where I come from professionally is working with kiddos with what we might term as having more severe or profound developmental disabilities on some level. And, you know, for many high school kids, we looked at it from that perspective and talked about what high school could be for somebody during an individualized education program plan meeting. We would really look at it, or try to look at it many times from a person-centered planning approach rather than a deficit approach.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we talk about so-called circle of friends and
Yes.
building this community in this circle of friends so that their high school experience was something that was meaningful to them, was interesting to them on an individual level, which is really what you're talking about for anybody,
Right.
I think. And what's particularly relevant to me as we talk about the transition from high school for any kiddo to post-secondary education, college, or university, is the fact that kids are transitioning from being told what to do and what to study, what classes to take for the most part, and they're transitioning into this world of, okay, what are you interested in learning more about? What are you good at? Where do your interests lie? And really that's the process of picking a major and or not picking a major and taking classes for a
Right.
year or two before you pick a major. The process of picking a major and then re-picking a major 2 years later. You know?
Right.
And this is something that all kids go through. It's normal. It's typical. And so person-centered planning really does, I think, put to work the normalization principle.
Right.
Because people with developmental disabilities now are given the voice, the structure to decide, what do I want to do in college? You know, what do I want to do after college? And how will college help me get there? Is that accurate?
Oh, it's very accurate.
Very much so.
Uh-huh.
I think it's perfect.
So tell me then, can you, what are some examples of person-centered planning and how it's affected people with developmental disabilities in college?
Well, good, in college. So Susanna and I work with a program here in Georgia. Unfortunately, right now it's the only program in Georgia, but we're working
near
hard to
future?
change that.
Yes.
Excuse me, I have a tickle in my throat. But we go to the students in this program at Kennesaw State University,
Uh-huh.
and we help them think through what they want to get out of their time there at KSU. It's only a 2-year program. So we use a tool of person-centered planning called a MAPS. It's basically an action plan.
Making action plans is MAPS, right?
Yeah,
That's the
it used to
acronym?
be called a Miguel's action planning, and depending on who you talk to, it
Literature
changes.
you
So
read.
I just call it MAPS. It's an action plan. And what we do is we get the student and their family and circle of support, thank you for using that, and we bring them together and we have 6 conversations. The first conversation is, what's your story? What are 4 or 5 things that are events in your life that got you here, sitting in this circle right now. What's brought you here? Was it a really good teacher? Was it a friend? You want it to be in college because ... So we have that conversation, but then we quickly switch over to the conversation of your dreams.
Okay.
And that's, as you can continue to hear, that's the basis of person-centered planning. What is your dream? But in this facilitation, I want them to come up with 3 major goals to fulfill their dream. And those goals are, what are they going to do for the career? What are you going to do in leisure or recreation? And then what are you going to do as a leader? So what are the goals that will build your big dream in those 3 areas? And then we take a second to talk about the nightmare, but only a second. But this is the really fun part. The great part is everybody in the circle of support gets to share one word, an attribute of your contribution. So what is it that they see you as being very good at? And that goes on this facilitation called a MAPS. Then we use what you're really good at to help you achieve your goal. So you see how it just, the dots are connected. And then, as Susanna said, you come up with the action plan. Who's going to do what by when? And I love that part.
Sure.
Because so often person-centered planning is left all fluffy and dreams, and there's no
Where's the concrete?
anchor to it.
What needs to happen now
Right.
and what needs to happen tomorrow?
Exactly.
What needs to
Right.
happen next year type thing.
So we're actually facilitating these plans
Right.
in
Okay.
college campuses, but it's an action plan, a person-centered action plan for that student.
So what are some examples of dreams? You talking about people's
Oh,
dreams.
wow,
Like, what
yeah.
do people say? What might be some examples?
Sport, do you want to talk about some of the students?
Some of the students are very interested, as she was saying, in sports, and so they want
sports
to be
medicine.
They want to be on a sports management team, or they want to work with the physical therapist. They want to be a personal trainer. A student yesterday that we heard from wants to be a massage therapist, and so some of them are career-based, but
Okay.
others are, what do you want to get out of these classes? What classes? I want to take a class in American history because I love history, and I really
Or planes. Someone was just an expert on planes.
And I really like the adding in the recreation and leisure piece, because that's something we leave out a whole lot. And so encouraging students
What are you
to
going to do
create
to have fun?
community around fun things, not just sitting in class. And so that's how naturally you find friends who are interested in the same things you are. And so that's a big base of community. So
But another foundational piece of person-centered planning is, we brought up the one student who wanted to do something with planes.
Right.
And so when he shared that with his team, they all immediately closed their arms and sat back. And basically,
you could physically see a shift.
You
in
could, the
room.
energy, everything about it. Don't put that up there on his plan, because you're going to give him false hope. He'll never be a pilot. He'll never be able to fly. So you're going to put that on his plan, and you're going to walk away, and we're going to have to facilitate it. How are we going to make it happen? But here's the great part about person-centered planning is you always presume competence in someone's dream. You always presume competence. So when he said that about the airplanes and everybody starts, leaning back, you have additional conversations.
Right.
What about flying planes is important to you? What about being a physical therapist is important to you?
Okay.
What you often find is some people that maybe not in these college environments, but some people want to be a doctor, and they have a significant cognitive disability. What about that is important to you? I want to wear a lab coat. That was what that made their heart sing and their toes tingle. So you work through to, what is it about this big dream that's important to you?
It's attractive to you.
Yeah,
And then you can talk
then you
about
work on that
So you
piece.
find the roots of it. We all identify things that, I really am attracted to this, and figuring out, why are you attracted to this? I want to wear scrubs and tennis shoes to work every day. They're
so
comfortable.
don't immediately, just say no.
You got to
Now,
figure out the
what
why.
part? Yeah, say yes, and what part of that is doable. We use the words positive and possible.
People get pigeonholed into what an idea of something is. Like
Right.
college, you have this vision of what college is, but you can be creative. College for a student with an intellectual disability looks a little different than one for a student without. And so if you get to the essence of it, and
That's good.
that's where that's where sometimes an outsider, like a facilitator of a person-centered plan, can really get to the essence, where everybody else has got these big X's, no.
We're almost too close to the
Mhm.
issue to step back
Like,
maybe and
Well, there's got to be there's another piece to it, and you
right.
just get so caught up in this is not possible.
Mm-hmm.
You can't be creative.
And
What's interesting about that is you remind me that, and this is again true for so many teenagers, even adults like myself, who don't know what we don't know about professions. And so I
Exactly.
want to be a doctor. Why do you want to be a doctor? Because I like helping people. Oh, well, you may not realize there's many other avenues for helping people
Right.
besides being a doctor, but a teenager may not realize that and know that. So
Right.
being a doctor is the only way to get there.
It's being a firefighter. You
Right.
know, I had a student who she really wanted to be a firefighter. It's like, well, let's think about other ways you can help somebody. And
Mhm.
I know when I was starting college, I wanted to be in a band, and the essence of that was I wanted to figure out how to meet women. Well, I had to figure out other ways ultimately of meeting women, but that's neither here nor there, I think. But
That's actually on many plans.
yeah,
the
it
part
would've
of
been mine.
I
relationships.
drew some drums on
Mhm.
a person-centered plan.
Well, you said something related. We're joking, but it's related to the idea of recreation and leisure. And when you
Yes.
look at the literature in the area of mental retardation or intellectual disabilities, there's a real dearth, comparatively so, of literature on recreation and leisure.
true.
It's something we don't talk about, as you mentioned, very often. That's a big part of what college can provide, is an avenue for figuring out recreation and leisure. And when we started the discussion, I think you were talking about social skill development in college campuses. How much we do that as typical students on
Right.
campus. We figure out how to interact. We figure out what groups to join, and how
Right.
important that is for people with developmental disabilities, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's definitely, and it's a relaxing, safe place. You're not focused on getting this test done or reading this. It's, what do I want to do for fun? What relaxes me? What gets me excited? And I come from a recreation and leisure background. I was
That's
a camp
right.
director.
Right.
And so those kinds of experiences teach you leadership skills. They teach you how to win and how to lose and how to
Right.
fail. But they also teach you the joy of community and rallying around each other. And those kinds of opportunities are really crucial to development
Right, right.
of the whole person. I talk all the time about we need to develop the whole person, not the academic side, but recreation and leisure, and what really makes a person who they are, relationships and friendships and all those many pieces that are part of all of our lives. Everyone deserves to have those things cultivated in their lives.
Right, right. Well, you mentioned earlier that in Georgia, despite the fact that there's well over 250 college campuses that have opportunities for people with developmental disabilities to complete programs, Georgia has one campus, and that's Kennesaw State University, right?
Their Academy for Inclusive Learning.
Right. Where are we? What's the state of the state in Georgia in terms of post-secondary education? for people
It's
with
looking
developmental
bright. So
Talk
we
about
have,
being person-centered.
we had a big victory with the legislature. So we had a big victory with the legislature this year.
Uh-huh.
We had asked and advocated for $350,000. Unfortunately, with the way the economy is today, that was a little outside their realm of abilities this go round. But they did offer $100,000. So $50,000 will go to help continue the program at Kennesaw State University, and another $50,000 is going to go to start another program in South Georgia. And we're working with a couple of campuses down there to figure out what the right fit is, because right now you got to have the right fit. And we've also received some generous funding from the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities here in Georgia.
Wonderful.
As well as the Georgia Council on Developmental Disabilities. And with that money, we hope to open 2 more programs. So hopefully we'll have 3 programs open in the next 2 years and be able to assist other colleges in doing feasibility studies and really be able to continue our movement. And as I talked about this, seeing it to believe it, the more programs we have and the more options we have and people see this and the demand goes up, hopefully the legislature, DBHDD, private funders can join together and really make this reality happen, just like governments and private organizations have made college available for other minorities in our state and in our country. So we're on the move. We're really excited. My job's just getting a lot more intense. And
You're a little busier these days.
I'm a little busier these days, but it's really
In a good way.
exciting. And a lot of movements happen in the short
amount of time.
2 years that our center has really been focusing on this.
Right.
The work's been done for the past 10 years. Cheryl Arno has really been at the forefront. She did this without structure, without backing from an organization. She just kind of
With passion.
took the banner
Pure
with passion and ran, and we were able to bring her in, get some funding, and really push this, and it's come to fruition, and we're real excited.
Sure, yeah. Cheryl's a real bulldog, isn't she?
She is.
Yeah.
She's great. Really what we're talking about here as we sort of conclude our discussion, we're talking about investing in people who can ultimately give back to the community, just like we invest in everyone else through federal and state programs. We're talking about investing in people with developmental disabilities and putting them in a better position to live independently, to become tax-paying citizens,
To be employed.
and ultimately give back to the community. The alternative is to not invest in a segment of our population and not only deny them the right of participation and the right to be valid citizens, but also then ultimately cost us, society, cost taxpayers money in taking care of them, or at least losing a segment that could be tax-paying citizens. So I think it's a great deal that way.
And research proves that a student going through a post-secondary education program is more likely to be employed, more likely to be employed with a full-time 40-hour-a-week job and make more money and get off of the government caseload, whether it's through VR or SSI. And so those resources can be allocated to other individuals who might need a little bit more assistance. It's a no-brainer in my world. I think that we're silly for not moving forward.
It doesn't have to be a degree program. It's giving people the opportunity, like we talked about at the very beginning, to become who they're going to be with self-esteem and dignity, and then able to go into the next part of life being a contributing citizen, just like you said.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Well, I'll tell you, I appreciate you guys coming down and talking with us in the studio about this today, and I would love to have you guys back to have some further discussions around this topic.
Definitely.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much, Susanna, Stacy. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Greg.
You're watching Education Forum.